Okay, we are now into 1933-34. How about some depression, boys and girls? It's hitting the Senators hard. It's hitting the New York Americans hard. They're not financially able to compete with the other teams. Not that the other teams are making a ton of money themselves at this stage of the game. Toronto leads the Canadian division 26-13-9. Montreal 22-20-6. Montreal Maroons 19-18-11. New York Americans 15-23-10. And the woeful Ottawa Senators 13-29-6. The Detroit Red Wings 24-14-10 in the American division. They're the leaders. Chicago 20-17-11. The New York Rangers 21-19-8. And then Boston bringing up the rear at 18-25-5. And Boston goes through some controversy this season. They go to a 2-referee system this year. It lasts 5 years. They only had 1 linesman. So 2 referees, 1 linesman. Eventually they go back to 1 referee, 2 linesmen. This is the Senators' last year. They will be moved for the 1934-35 season. There will not be another team in Ottawa until the Senators come back in 1992. December 12th of 1933. Boston's Eddie Shore. He gets run over by King Clancy of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and he gets up and hits the first jersey he sees, which is Ace Bailey. Ace Bailey falls back, cracks his skull on the ice, and he never plays again. Eddie Shore is given a 16-game suspension, which is a third of a season, so the equivalent of about a 28-game suspension now. I would think that if there was video footage of said incident, if it happened now, I would think a lifetime ban would be looked into. Eddie Shore is one of those polarizing figures, and I haven't talked very much about him in this because, honestly, he was probably the first and greatest superstar defenseman of his time, and yet his ability to go over that line and burn that line and get suspended in an incident like this is why I don't really revere the guy. And he had a Hall of Fame level career, but again, this is where when they talk about, well, this guy's not in the Hall of Fame because he's kind of a jerk, and this guy's not in the Hall of Fame because he wasn't very nice and he didn't take a trade very well. Yeah, if Eddie Shore's in the Hall of Fame, really we should stop talking about personalities and acts on the ice keeping a guy out. I mean that. And an all-star game was played in honor of Ace Bailey that year as a fundraiser for Ace Bailey and his family. So the NHL kind of rallied around that, ostracized Eddie Shore for 16 games, but and that likely affected Boston's record, but it is one of the reasons why I don't talk very much about Eddie Shore during these videos. Chuck Gardner was the goaltender for the Chicago Blackhawks. Fantastic goaltender. They won the Cup that year, and he died of a brain tumor shortly thereafter at the age of 29. So it is all happiness. You've got a depression, skull fracture, and a brain tumor. And this is a great series. Like, isn't this a moment where you're like, I'm so glad I watched this? All right. Hart Trophy goes to Aurel Joliet of Montreal. Calder goes to Russ Blinko of the Montreal Maroons. The Vezina Trophy goes to Charlie Gardner of Chicago, the lowest goals against average. The Lady Byng goes, of course, to Frank Boucher of the New York Rangers. At this point, I'm assuming that if he retired, they might still give it to him. Goals, Charlie Conacher leads the way for Chicago with 32. Assists, Joe Primo of Toronto with 32 as well. And I just need to double check one thing here, because that doesn't sound right. That Charlie Conacher played for Chicago. That doesn't sound right. I know it was Charlie Gardner, and I had Charlie Gardner on the brain. All right, one sec. No, that is wrong. He played for Toronto. Okay, so with many apologies, that should say Toronto. Let's get to the playoffs now. And both Conacher and Primo had 32 of each. So 32 goals, 32 assists to lead the league in a 48-game schedule. Series A. So again, this is the 2 first-place teams. Playoff against one another. The winner goes on a bye to the finals. Detroit beats Toronto in Toronto 2-1. They then win in Toronto 6-3. Toronto's like, fine. They go to Detroit and they win 3-1. They win 5-1 to force Game 5. In Game 5 at home, Detroit finally breaks the hometown jinx in that series and wins the series 3-2. Series B and C, quarterfinals between these four teams. Chicago, Montreal. Chicago wins game 1, 3-2. Montreal and Chicago tie game 2. It's an overtime tie of 1-1. There's some interesting scores from this year too. There was a game that went into overtime tied 3-3 that ended up 7-3 because there was just a 10-minute period and it didn't matter how many goals were scored. So you can see how that would kind of be a mess. Anyway, Chicago wins that series over Montreal. 4-3 is the final score. Remember, this is a total goal series. Series C, the New York Rangers and Montreal Maroons play a barn burner of a scoreless tie. And then the Maroons win game 2, 2-1 over the Rangers. So the Maroons win the series by a score of 2-1. Series D, also still total goals. Chicago beats the Maroons 3-0 in game 1. They then win game 2, 3-2. So they win the series by a score of 6-2. In the finals, it is Chicago and Detroit. So two teams in the American division. Again, the Canadian division's kind of froze out here. Toronto would have won the President's Trophy that year. Just throwing that out there. In the finals, Chicago beats Detroit in double overtime in the first game. They then win in Detroit in game 2. Detroit doesn't play well at home. This is clear. That'd be 4 out of 5 games at home they lost. Then the series shifts to Chicago. Detroit wins on the road. So maybe they win 5-2. But Chicago wins game 4 by a score of 1-0 in double overtime. So they win the final in a series 3-1. Charlie Gardner, the goaltender, and of course this would be his last year in the NHL. It's a fascinating season, and again we're careening towards World War II having a devastating effect on players. A lot of players went overseas at that stage, which we can't identify with now because professional athletes are very insulated from that, from having to go over and perform military service or just signing up in general. But this league would be affected by that. And there was a rumor during this season that the New York Americans and the Ottawa Senators might merge. And right away, I believe the president was Frank Calder, and he said, yeah, that's not going to happen. He was right. The Senators were going to move, and then they were going to fold, and the Americans would fold not that long after that. The Maroons weren't long for the NHL either, and then what you're left with is your original 6. But we'll get to that. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through and you just happened upon this video. And congratulations to the Hawks on winning the 1934 Stanley Cup. We'll be back tomorrow with the last chapter that I am able to do before my trip to Vegas. And I don't think I'm going to be able to do this while I'm in Vegas. I have a funny feeling I won't be able to get that done. But hey, you guys will still be here when I get back, and there's a lot of other stuff for me to film in Vegas. So I'll talk to you guys again soon.